The revolution continues here in the Jordan Levy Show. Welcome aboard. Happy to have you with us. We're going to be here till 6 o'clock. And we've had a very interesting show, and we're going to keep it going right now because Brian Skerry joins us. He's an underwater, ocean underwater, not lake underwater, photographer for National Geographic. And what else can you say? I mean, that's kind of really something special. I mean, and I welcome you right now, Brian, to our show. And he's a 1984 Worcester State University graduate.
Thanks, Jordan. Great to be here.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. Leanne Scales is here, and she sits in for me all the time. So she's just a regular guest and head of everything at Worcester State University, except she's not the president. He's being inaugurated,
we
right?
have a fine president.
I know we do.
And he's
Barry Maloney.
And hats off. He wanted the inauguration to be about alumni like Brian, our students and our faculty. He said, I can't tell you how many times, it's not about me.
Well, and this is about Brian and as an alum of Worcester State. Let's just start off. What does that mean to you? I mean, you didn't start underwater photography at Worcester State, did you?
Well, I actually started a little bit before that. I had always had an interest in the ocean. I can't really explain it. I grew up in a little blue-collar town of Uxbridge, Massachusetts.
No ocean out there.
No ocean there for sure. But for some reason, I was drawn to the water, drawn to the ocean. You know, my parents took me to the beaches when I was a kid, and I had a pool in my backyard growing up. So I always took to the water, watching Cousteau documentaries and reading National Geographic. But I started diving when I was about 15 years old, and maybe a year or two after that, I attended a conference in Boston called the Boston Sea Rover Show, and I saw all these filmmakers and photographers, scientists showing their work, and I sort of had an epiphany and said, that's the job for me. But in hindsight, it was probably 1 billion to 1 chance of actually achieving that dream. But one of the first steps in the process was to get a good education. I went to Worcester State College back in those days, before university, and I majored in communications media. I took classes in photography and filmmaking, documentary, animation. I didn't know exactly what direction I was going to go, filmmaking or photography, but it was always going to be underwater. And I sort of took what I learned there and then applied it to the underwater world.
National Geographic, everyone knows about National Geographic. I mean, it is like the label of exciting nature. I could eclipse a description, whether it's above water or below water. It is the station you go or the website that you go to for some of the most fantastic, exciting parts of life.
Agreed.
How did you get connected with National Geographic?
Well, National Geographic was always the dream, as you said.
Was that the bar?
Yeah,
okay.
That was the gold standard. It's where I wanted to be. But, at pretty much any time in their history, the magazine has only had 2 or 3 underwater photographers working there. And when I was going to school at Worcester State back in the 1980s, those guys that were at National Geographic didn't seem to be in a hurry to go anywhere. They were well established. But eventually, over time, after graduation, I sort of, carved out a strategy. I knew that I needed to become a great diver. I needed to spend a lot of time underwater. I needed to hone my skills as a photographer. And slowly, I sort of built up that portfolio of images and skills that would hopefully get me that opportunity. In the end, what happened was I became friends with a veteran National Geographic photographer, an underwater guy. He lived in Maine. Bill Kurtzinger was his name. And he called me one day and he said, I've got 2 assignments that the magazine wants me to do. One of them I want to do. The other one I don't want to do. And the other one that he didn't want to do was a shipwreck story on Cape Cod, actually. And he said he had been out there the year before and the visibility was terrible and he didn't think there was anything there to photograph. But he said, look, they're going to do it anyway. So if you want, I'll recommend you for it. But keep in mind that with National Geographic, you'll only ever get 1 chance. And with this project, I think you got about a 98% chance of failure. So wow. I thought about it, and I said, another chance may never come down the road. So I asked for his recommendation, and based on that and a brief portfolio, they looked at my portfolio, they gave me the job. Everything he said was true, but I worked very hard. I got the pictures. They were very pleased, and it was at a time where he was sort of moving on in his career, and they made a decision, as they said back then, to develop me as one of their regular shooters. So 15 years later, I'm beginning my 21st story for them.
Wow, that's great. The ocean is so intriguing. We talked a little bit off the air about that. To me, it's that big dark mystery. It's much more intriguing to me than outer space, and because there's so much there, and the life, the animal life, what can be seen and what can't be seen. Your experiences over these years have to be scary at times?
Absolutely.
I would be scared to death. I mean, to get down to the depths that you get to.
I think I have what I would call a healthy respect for the ocean. I've certainly had my share of dicey moments, and there have been some experiences that I would rather not relive. But, over the time, I've been diving for about 35 years, and I estimate that I've probably got 8,000 or 10,000 hours in the ocean. And the good far outweighs the bad. I've had many more great experiences than those dicey ones, but there's no question that this is not without risk. I've been lost under Arctic ice, and I've drifted off the coast of Ireland when the dive boat never saw me for 2.5 hours, got picked up by a fishing boat. I've been chased out of the water by sharks and grabbed by a big squid called Humboldt squid in Mexico.
So you go back in.
I keep going back because, as I said, I've got a handful of sort of scary moments, but I've got countless fantastic moments. And the ocean is an endless source of material. As a photojournalist, there's no end to what I can find there for stories and amazing animals to photograph.
Do you think of yourself as an explorer?
I do, because I think, to be a good wildlife photographer, we have to be great explorers. I spend so many days on boats and helicopters and journeying, just to get there. And then once I'm underwater, every dive is an exploration. Every dive is a discovery. Even in local beaches here in New England, you slip your head beneath the surface of those waves and you never know what you're going to find. The ocean is one of the last remaining wild places on Earth. There's no fences, no corrals. Animals can come and go as they please, and you never know what you'll see.
Over this career, have you ever found a species that was unknown at that point? Or haven't seen, or was never never photographed?
Yes, I have. Actually, the very first photograph that I had published in National Geographic, actually back in 1996, I wasn't actually working for them yet. It was a stock photo. But it was a picture of an animal called an oarfish, O-A-R fish, oarfish, and it's an animal that inspired sea serpent legends, but only dead ones had ever been seen. And I was in the Bahamas photographing sharks in a place where the water is very deep. I was up near the surface, and I saw this animal out in the distance, didn't know what it was. Curiosity got the best of me, and I sort of struck out after it. And as I got closer, it was very bizarre looking. It looked like a sword. It was about 10 feet long. It was laterally flat, but very thin. And it was, as I said, about 10 feet long, and it was hanging vertically in the water column, like a sword, just drifting along. And I managed to get about 3 frames, 3 pictures, and then it just sank as if the sword was dropped in the ocean and disappeared from view. Turned out it had never been photographed before, alive, and it was first published by Geographic and then in about 14 other countries around the world. So that was pretty cool. And I have also been in the presence of scientists who've discovered new species. I was in Raja Ampat, Indonesia, a very remote part of Indonesia, working on a story last year with a scientist, and on several dives, because this is such a remote place, he was discovering new species of fish. So, the ocean is largely unexplored. Only about 5% of the world's oceans have truly been explored, so lots of opportunity out there.
So there's a lot of creatures under there. We have no idea what they are.
No question. And they could be
the cure-all for something, or they could be the future of something, or
absolutely.
We don't know.
Yeah.
Food product.
No question about it. There are major pharmaceutical companies and nutraceutical companies that are investing time and resources into the ocean because there are new drugs and medicines and so forth that will come from the ocean. I think it's important to think about the statistics. For example, it's often been said that about 3/4 of the Earth's surface is ocean or is water, which is true. But I think a more important fact is that 98% of Earth's biosphere, 98% of where livable, habitable planet, where animals can live, is ocean. And yet less than 5% of that has been explored, and we're losing a lot of it. The oceans are in trouble. And that's a big focus of my work these days.
I wanted to ask you about that. Now, you've been doing this work for 15 years with National Geographic. But You've been doing this ocean photography and diving for many, many years. How has it visually changed
Well,
to you?
that's a great question.
I'm sure you've gone back to some of the same spots. So how has it visually changed?
Well, you wouldn't think that in the span of a human lifetime we would be able to see and witness dramatic changes, almost geologic changes. And yet, in the 35 years that I've been diving, in even much shorter spans of time, I've seen dramatic changes. When I first started diving in New England, I used to go to the beaches in Newport, Rhode Island, and Jamestown, and Cape Cod, New Hampshire, and I can remember seeing huge shoals, huge schools of pollock and baby fish, and big silver schools. You don't see that anymore. Those bait fish, those young fry, just don't seem to exist in the numbers that they used to. As I started traveling, once I started to do this for a living, I began traveling around the world, and I return now to some of the coral reefs that I've been to, and they're just devastated. Right now, today, in 2012, we have lost about 40 to 50% of the world's coral reefs. They're either severely degraded or completely gone.
Why aren't people concerned about that? It just seems like we're just so abstract to the ocean that we just don't get it. I understand there's a great debate in this world about global warming and all that, and it's turned into more of a political, debate than it should be. But when you hear about the coral reefs being destroyed, I mean, I don't think we teach it well. I don't think we've gotten the session, all due respect to Worcester State. I mean, I don't know what we teach over there about what the ramifications of this are going to be.
Well, the ramifications are huge.
Yeah, it's not about my aesthetics of me not seeing your beautiful pictures and your beautiful book. But
right.
There are real ramifications from this happening.
There are. And I think to answer your question about why, there hasn't been a lot of attention, I often say that I think the ocean suffers from this terrible fate of having a beautiful exterior. We go to the beach and we see the ocean and it's beautiful, or we go sailing and we have a great day on the water. But so much of what's happening is below the radar. It's out of our view and it's happening underneath. And unless you're exploring the ocean on a regular basis, you're not seeing these things. So that's why it's sort of incumbent on me as a journalist to tell not only the celebratory stories, make the beautiful pictures, but show the bad things as well. And I would say that the ramifications are tremendous. 3 out of every 4 breaths that a human being takes, even here inland in Worcester, comes from the ocean. It is a great carbon sink. It processes carbon and turns out oxygen far more than the rainforests do. And yet, we're destroying it. As we talked about the coral reefs, 90% of the big fish in the ocean, 90% of the tunas, the sharks, and the billfish have been lost in the last 50 or 60 years post-World War II because of industrial commercial overfishing. So there's all of these things happening. There's acidification occurring because of the rise of CO2 on our planet, and our oceans are in trouble. I think the good news is that it's not too late, that we can, begin to turn some of these things around and create solutions, but the first step is awareness.
Mike, we ever take a break?
Yeah.
All right, let's take a break. We'll get back with, I guess, most intriguing. We'll be right back.
This is the Jordan Levy Show.
I'm breaking out with hives over this. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps. I would be in glory, man. You wouldn't be able to shut me up ever. I'd be talking on the radio when the radio isn't even on.
On WTAG.